Our story begins in the year 15 ABY. Leia and Han were saying goodbye to their son Ben Solo, as Leia was concerned about the dark side of the Force within him, so she and Han opted to send Ben to Luke. Privately, she would ask Luke not to tell Ben about Vader, which Luke respected her wish, but in that moment he also felt that it was important that he understood that Anakin redeemed himself too. And this would be a difficult situation for the two in this moment, but then Yoda would appear to only Luke, as he was here to offer some guidance, but Leia could sense the presence of someone being here, so she did know that Yoda was here in a way. And Yoda, in his wisdom, wanted to know why they wouldn't tell Ben the truth. Luke explained that it was not his burden to bear, where Yoda would respond with, "Burden, you say?" Luke was confused by this, but Yoda would offer a different solution through a lesson, which was really just a reminder. Failure is the best teacher, meaning that Luke's failure to listen to Yoda and Obi-Wan's advice of staying on Dagobah to complete Luke's training led him to saving his father and allowing Anakin to fulfill the prophecy. Luke realized what Yoda meant, as it was only 11 years ago that Luke saved his father. So Luke would thank Master Yoda, and with Leia listening to this, the two twins would decide that it was time to tell Ben the truth. Han was a bit unsure about this after being told what they were going to do, but eventually he decided to agree with this. When Luke began training Ben, one of the first lessons Ben would learn would be the story of his grandfather, Anakin Skywalker. How he became Darth Vader, which shocked Ben, but Luke would get to the part of how Anakin redeemed himself and defeated the Sith and brought back balance to the Force and the galaxy. It would be an inspiring story for Ben, and he would become more trusting of Luke as he understood why he wasn't told this story, as he could feel the idea of it being a burden. Over the next 6 years, Ben would become Luke's personal Padawan, and the two of them would be joined by Lando Calrissian in order to understand Luke's vision of Exegol. They would fight Kiza, but the fight would be quicker thanks to the addition of Ben Solo. Unfortunately, they wouldn't be able to find Ochi or his dagger, but they would continue to search for him until Luke and Ben found his ship on Pisana, while Lando stayed on the planet to continue searching. Luke and Ben would find nothing on the ship, but they would notice grey patches of sand in the area, and they would discover it to be quicksand. Ben thought perhaps they should see what's under there, but Luke didn't want to endanger Ben. But Ben suggested that this was for the name of peace, and Luke decided that he was right. They would make their way down into the sands, and after getting sucked in, they would sense someone was nearby where they would find Ochi and kill him. Easily by sidestepping him, as he was weakened because he had been trapped down in the pit for days. The two Jedi would find a way out of the caves, and Luke made Ben promise him that he would never tell his mother if they see her. Ben would agree to not. With the blade now in their hands, they would use the coordinates to go to the ruins of the second Death Star on the moon Kef Bir, where they would find the Sith Wayfinder. Luke was haunted a bit by the memory of his fight against Sidious and Vader in the remains of the room where Luke and Ben were standing in. But Ben was full of awe to learn that this was the place where his grandfather was redeemed, and Luke would give him a history lesson on the events that took place here. But shortly after, they would leave as it was time to go due to the tide starting to rise again, and they'd lose the opportunity to leave. Ben was learning so much about his family history, but he was so grateful for his uncle teaching him this history. He thought it was crazy that he got to be a part of this history, and the two would escape with the Sith Wayfinder. The two Jedi would travel to Exegol with the use of the Sith Wayfinder. Once they got there, they would discover many ancient Sith artifacts, a Sith fleet/army underground, and what looked to be members of some sort of Sith cult. The most shocking thing of it all was that in their sights, one of the most evil Sith of them all was there. Emperor Palpatine. Palpatine would greet young Skywalker and would be surprised to see Ben Solo here too. But he would attempt to play his hand here by trying to explain to Ben that his grandfather once joined him and trusted him until Luke stole him away from him. But this wouldn't work as Ben knew the truth. Palpatine then tried to see if maybe he could suck the life essence out of them, but unfortunately that wouldn't work because they weren't a dyad. Their connection was strong, but this was not enough for it to be a dyad. So he would attempt to electrocute him with any force ability he had left, but Luke would absorb the force lightning, and Ben would use the force to pull his life support, killing Palpatine without ever striking him. After that, the two of them had no desire to stick around, and they would escape with the Sith Citadel collapsing onto the Sith fleet and the Sith Eternal cultists. And just like that, the Sith were no more. During their escape, the darkness Luke and Ben felt were finally over, and Luke couldn't believe it. It wasn't Ben who was the darkness, it was Palpatine. Palpatine had just somehow used the Force to get Ben involved in the dark side somehow. He didn't know how that was even possible, but Palpatine was a very powerful dark side user. A couple days later, when Luke and Ben returned to Ossus, Luke asked Ben if he'd like to see his parents, which Ben responded with an uncertain yes, as it had been 6 years since he last saw them, and he was worried they wouldn't love him anymore. But in the end, Ben would agree to it, and it would be arranged. Ben would rekindle his relationship with his parents, and Leia and Han would express to Ben that they never hated him. They only sent him to Luke because they wanted to keep him safe with someone they trusted. And Ben understood this, as Luke had been an incredible uncle and teacher. But something happened to Ben in that moment. The darkness that was gone had ended up coming back. And he didn't say anything on the trip to seeing his parents, but there was this once kind, gentle voice to him that now was suddenly angry and hateful and constantly put him down. And Luke and Leia could sense this, and Han, while not having the Force, could see there was something wrong with his son. So they got him to sit down, and Ben told him that they'd been talking to someone for a couple of years, someone who was really nice to him, named Snoke. But now he was becoming hateful and angry at him. And Ben told him he thinks it may have been that missing clone, because one thing he noticed was that Snoke looks a lot like those other clones, but he didn't really get a chance to really think upon it, as he had to deal with Palpatine, and then Snoke was going off at him constantly. So Luke would be allowed to enter Ben's mind, and he would see Snoke and be able to locate him. He told Leia where him and the First Order were hiding at, as they were able to confirm it was the First Order, because Luke was able to see Snoke going on a rampage killing a lot of stormtroopers. So him, Leia, and Han would go out into the unknown regions with Chewie, Lando, R2-D2, and C-3PO. They'll discover that Ilum had been turned into this giant, massive space station that had some sort of large ring around it with a cannon that looked like it could destroy multiple planets at once, as it was clearly meant to resemble the Death Star, except much larger. They would also find many technologically advanced ships across the unknown regions, and they would send this proof to the Ghost Crew, which Hera then would present this to the New Republic, and together, the New Republic would immediately begin rebuilding their army and navy and prepare to conquer the unknown regions. But during this time, they were able to also uncover that the Kuat drive yards had been assisting the First Order, thanks to some investigation from Hera, and Kuat would be properly captured by the New Republic, as well as many Imperial Star Destroyers and a Super Star Destroyer that hadn't been dismantled yet. And after interrogating Kuat of Kuat, they would find all the locations in the unknown regions. And so they would send their forces to attack those areas, and the First Order would not be prepared for them. The New Republic would still take heavy losses. However, the Amaxine shipyards would be found after Luke had located the supremacy to be at that shipyard. So all of the New Republic's forces would gather, and this would be a very challenging battle as the supremacy was extremely powerful. But thanks to the combined efforts of the Final Executor and the Imperial Star Destroyers and all the Mon Calamari ships and all the support ships, they would end up overpowering it and destroy it after losing many of their own ships and starfighters. And Snoke, who's in that ship, would end up perishing with the ship as he was too distracted trying to convince Ben to join the dark side and just killing whoever was near him because he was on a complete rampage, because without Palpatine controlling him, he was a free being, but he had none of the skills that Palpatine had, because Palpatine was the one who controlled the First Order, not Snoke. That was all just the illusion. And shortly after, Starkiller Base would also be taken over by the New Republic, and they would start dismantling the cannon. And luckily, they would end up finding Lando's daughter and saving much of the children who hadn't been indoctrinated yet. And years later, after taking over the Amaxine shipyards, the New Republic would defeat the Amaxine warriors who were also at Amaxine, and they didn't destroy any of the First Order shipyards or the Amaxine one, as they actually used it to build up their own military forces to continue to conquer the unknown regions, and they would wipe out the Yuuzhan Vong, as well as any other threats out there too, such as Abeloth, the Knights of Ren, and other Sith cultists, who would be destroyed by the growing Jedi Order. And during this time, Ben would find Rey, due to his connection with her as a dyad, and after getting to know each other for a long time, a couple decades later, they would end up getting married, as they were of course both old enough to. And Luke would have a much better Jedi Order that allowed attachments, thanks to some advice Anakin gave him along the way. And the Jedi and the New Republic would benefit for years to come across multiple galaxies that were united from what started as a strong connection between an uncle and his nephew. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is our story. Thank you guys so much for watching. You guys are awesome, and